The smell of cheap charcoal and stale beer hit me before I even turned the engine off. I pulled into my father's driveway to grab the very last box of my belongings, only to find my own eviction being celebrated like a national holiday. Suspended across the aluminum siding of the garage was a massive, custom-printed vinyl banner. In blindingly bright red block letters, it screamed, "Goodbye, Freeloader, do not come back." Country music thumped from blown-out speakers. My uncle was holding a red plastic cup, yelling to anyone who would listen that a 30-year-old woman who plays on her laptop all day should be deeply ashamed of draining her poor father's resources. My younger sister was laughing hysterically. Someone, I think it was one of the neighbor's kids, actually threw a half-eaten hot dog at the passenger side door of my sedan. I didn't roll down the window. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at my father. He was standing by the grill, wearing a smug, victorious grin. He genuinely believed he had finally won. He believed he was cutting dead weight from his life. He had absolutely no idea that he had just thrown a massive party to celebrate his own total financial execution. I calmly stepped out of the car, walked through the barrage of mocking applause, grabbed my final cardboard box from the laundry room, and walked back out. Before I got into my driver's seat, I pulled out my phone and snapped one perfectly framed, high-resolution photo of that ridiculous banner. My father smirked, probably thinking I was taking a sad little souvenir of my humiliation. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. The countdown had officially begun. To understand why an entire family system collapsed into absolute, irreversible bankruptcy in less than 14 days, you need to understand the anatomy of a grand illusion. My name is Sloan. I'm an independent digital operations architect. I build enterprise-level financial infrastructures and automated logistics systems for regional supply chains. I make a very comfortable six-figure income. But in my family's strictly blue-collar, calloused hands worldview, if you are not sweating through a high-visibility vest and carrying heavy things, you are unemployed. 3 years ago, I moved into my father's basement to save money while transitioning to freelance consulting. My father owned a commercial graphics and corporate sign installation business. From the outside, with his 3 branded cargo vans and matching polo shirts, he played the role of the successful local patriarch beautifully. But on the inside, his business was a rotting carcass. My father ran his company the same way he ran his family, through sheer volume, intimidation, and blind arrogance. When a client was angry, he yelled louder. When materials were late, he blamed the government. He never, not once, looked at a spreadsheet. Within my first month of living there, I noticed a terrifying pile of final notice utility bills shoved in the kitchen drawer. So, quietly, I logged into his portal and paid them. Then I noticed his core design software was about to be suspended for non-payment, which would have paralyzed his entire production floor. I attached my secondary credit card to the account. It started as a few $100s here and there, but fixing one leak in his business only revealed the massive structural flooding underneath. Half of his invoiced clients hadn't paid him in months, and he was too proud to follow up. He was floating payroll using high-interest payday loans. His commercial vehicle insurance was perpetually days away from cancellation. So, I became the phantom safety net. When he forgot to order the specialized aluminum brackets for a major corporate lobby install, I secretly expedited the freight shipping on my own dime so he wouldn't lose the $10,000 contract. When Friday rolled around and he was pacing the hallway, chain-smoking because he didn't have the cash to pay his installation crew, I silently wired the exact shortfall into his operating account, making it look like a delayed client check had cleared. I never paid the whole balance. I only ever paid the exact amount required to stop the ship from sinking. I kept his failure invisible. Over 36 months, the total amount of my own capital that I pumped into his dying empire was exactly $112,460. And how was I repaid for this invisible salvation? With relentless daily contempt. If I was sitting at the kitchen island, deep in a Zoom call, negotiating a complex data migration for a client, My father would intentionally turn on the blender and loudly ask when I was going to get a real job. He convinced my uncle, my sister, and my grandmother that he was generously funding my pathetic, lazy lifestyle. He built a mythology where he was the martyred provider and I was the parasite. And a toxic family system is a lot like a cult. Once the leader establishes the narrative, everybody else falls in line to earn his approval. But the most dangerous thing about a narcissist is that if they tell a lie long enough, they forget they made it up. My father actually started to believe his own myth. He forgot about the silent deposits. He forgot about the mysterious software renewals. He truly believed he was a self-made titan carrying a useless daughter. The turning point wasn't a screaming match. It was a Tuesday evening. I was sitting on the stairs in the dark, and I overheard him on the patio with my uncle. He was bragging about how he was going to serve me with a formal 30-day eviction notice just to see the look of panic on my face. My uncle laughed and called me a leech. In that moment, whatever remaining daughterly affection I possessed evaporated into thin air. People think revenge is a crime of passion, fueled by red-hot anger. It isn't. True revenge is completely cold. It is administrative. It is mathematical. I didn't say a word. I just went back to my room, opened my encrypted hard drive, and began compiling the dossier. I spent the next month quietly securing a lucrative, long-term contract in Colorado. I leased a beautiful apartment overlooking the mountains. I moved my valuables into a storage unit in the dead of night, and I meticulously cataloged every single receipt, every bank transfer, every paid invoice, and every panicked text message he had ever sent me, begging for administrative help. Then came the day of the barbecue. The banner, the hot dog on the window. When I drove away from that party, I drove straight to a coffee shop, opened my laptop, and initiated the ghost protocol. I logged into his commercial utility accounts and deleted my autopay routing numbers. I removed my credit card from his project management software, his design suites, and his vendor portals. I called his primary wholesale supplier, introduced myself as his former financial administrator, and formally revoked my authorization for any future emergency credit lines. I completely severed the invisible umbilical cord. Then, I sat back and I waited. The first domino fell on Monday afternoon. My father was trying to secure a massive, municipal signage contract. It was the kind of job that could have funded his business for a year. But the city required a valid, up-to-date certificate of liability insurance. His policy had expired on Sunday. Normally, the system would have auto-drafted from my card. Instead, the payment bounced. The city immediately disqualified his bid and handed the contract to his biggest competitor. On Tuesday morning, the internal architecture collapsed. His crew arrived at the warehouse to find that the central project management software was locked behind a paywall. Every single work order, every client measurement, every installation schedule, and every critical design file was completely inaccessible. They were totally blind. On Wednesday, the commercial power company dispatched a technician to the workshop because the secret, a rolling balance I had been paying for 3 years, was suddenly defaulted. They cut the power to the fabrication floor. My phone started ringing. It was my father. The smugness from the barbecue was completely gone. He left a voicemail, his voice shaking, trying to sound professional. "Sloan, honey, it seems there's a glitch with the workshop electricity. Could you call me back? We really need to get this sorted out." I deleted the message. By Thursday, the situation had escalated from confusion to sheer, unadulterated panic. My uncle left 3 rambling voicemails, begging me to help them access the software because clients were threatening to sue them for missed deadlines. But Friday was the absolute masterpiece. Friday was payroll, with no new contracts, no software, and no power to finish the existing jobs. The operating account was empty. My sister sent me a frantic, tearful text message. She said Dad was screaming, throwing things around the dark warehouse, and that the installation crew had threatened to walk out. She begged me to wire her $800 for her own rent. I replied with a single cropped screenshot. It was the ledger showing 3 months of her car payments that I had secretly covered the previous year so it wouldn't get repossessed. I typed, "Since you love the Goodbye Freeloader banner so much, you can ask Dad to pay it. Do not contact me again." Later that afternoon, my father attempted his final desperate move. He drove to the local wholesale supplier to buy materials on credit to salvage a weekend job. When they demanded payment, he smugly handed over his own platinum credit card, the one he loved to flash around but never actually used for business expenses. The cashier swiped it, declined. He demanded they try again, declined. He called his bank, screaming at the representative, only to have the horrifying reality dumped over his head in a crowded showroom. His credit was completely maxed out. His debt-to-income ratio was catastrophic. The only reason his card had never been shut off before was because I had been silently paying down the interest every month to keep the account alive. Without my payments, the bank had instantly frozen his assets. By Saturday morning, exactly 1 week after he threw a party to celebrate my eviction, he called me 11 times. He sent a text, "Please, I am begging you, let's meet." I replied, "Tomorrow, noon, the Highway Diner." When I walked into the diner, my father and my uncle were already sitting in a corner booth. They looked like they had aged 10 years in 7 days. They didn't order food. They didn't even have water. I slid into the booth opposite them. I didn't say hello. I just reached into my leather tote bag, pulled out a heavy 31-page bound dossier, and slid it across the table. My father opened it with trembling hands. His eyes immediately locked onto the bold, highlighted number on the summary page, $112, $460. He flipped through the pages in stunned silence. Bank statements, supplier receipts, emergency payroll transfers, and on the very last page, printed in glossy, high-resolution color, was the photo of him smiling under the Goodbye Freeloader banner. He looked up at me, his face the color of wet ash. "Sloan," he whispered, his voice cracking. Families help each other. You're acting like a debt collector. Please, just log in and turn the systems back on. We'll pay you back." I looked him dead in the eyes. I let the silence hang in the air for 5 agonizing seconds. "When I lived under your roof," I said softly, "you called me a freeloader. You humiliated me in front of the entire neighborhood. But when you were secretly living off my money, you called it family." My uncle tried to speak, stammering about how they were just joking around at the barbecue. I cut him off. "You weren't joking. You were arrogant, and arrogance is expensive." I stood up from the booth. My father reached out, desperate. "What do you want from me?" he pleaded. "Nothing," I replied. "I already paid my dues. I didn't leave because I was angry. I left because you finally proved that your ego costs more than my loyalty. Enjoy the bankruptcy." I walked out of the diner, got into my car, and drove to Colorado. The collapse was spectacular. Without my digital infrastructure and my silent cash flow, the business choked to death. By the end of the summer, public records showed his house had been foreclosed on to satisfy the mounting commercial liens. My grandmother had to move into an assisted living facility. My uncle ended up sleeping in a rusty camper van. And my father? He rented a miserable, 1-bedroom apartment near the industrial park, trying to find day labor work with a destroyed credit score and absolutely zero respect from the industry he used to pretend to rule. True revenge isn't about screaming matches or physical violence. True revenge is simply removing the safety net and letting gravity do the rest. But I have a question for you. If your family threw a party to celebrate your eviction while secretly surviving on your money, would you have given them the 31-page dossier to look at? Or would you have just disappeared into the night and let them figure out why the lights went out on their own? Let me know your exact strategy in the comments below. And if you love watching entitled people architect their own destruction, hit that subscribe button. I've got plenty more stories to tell.